We are going to give everybody a chance to share your thoughts, and we'll ask folks if you want to speak to stand, and if you move towards the center aisle, we will bring the microphone to you.
You've heard how Lucinda was very involved with United Methodist Women. And so as president of United Methodist Women, I was asked to tell about her. Lucinda could tell about herself better than I can. So I'm going to read you an excerpt from the book that she and her husband put together. United Methodist Women has been a big part of my life since 1952. That's 69 years ago. At our first little church in West Van Nuys, I was with a very active group of young mothers. In those days, the women's group was called WSCS, for Women's Society of Christian Service. Later, when the Methodist and United Brethren churches became one church, the United Methodist Church, the women's groups also merged to become United Methodist Women. In every church, UMW has been a great group, dedicated to the purpose, hardworking, supportive, and fun to be with. I enjoy the monthly unit meetings and being in one of the church circles, the smaller fellowship groups. I've held almost every office, including terms as president in Scottsdale and Escondido. Especially enjoyed being secretary of program resources, which involved promoting the reading program for the unit. There is a new list of books every year. In addition, we read our monthly magazine, Response. Also, keeping us informed and inspired are district and conference events, training sessions, and retreats. Exciting are the conference schools of Christian mission held each summer at various locations. 3 or 4 days of immersion in the current ecumenical mission studies, along with worship, fellowship, fun, and good food. A highlight for me was attending the National Assembly in 1986 at the Convention Center in Anaheim, California. The assembly is held once every 4 years, each time in a different U.S. city, with people attending from around the world. In 1957, I was given a special mission recognition pin by the Escondido unit. I wear it happily. When she came to our church, she asked about United Methodist Women. How can I join? Where's a circle? And then she ended up right away on our board. And each month she would tell us about the articles in Response magazine. About 5 years ago, we had a doll show. And Lucinda says, I have a doll I want to put on display. And you'll see that on the memorabilia table. It's a young girl reading the Response magazine. So.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Woody Hastings. I'm Lucinda's son-in-law, June's husband. I loved Lucinda. She was a mother-in-law for whom all of the mother-in-law jokes don't apply. She was wonderful, very loving, and very lovable. I admired Lucinda for a lot of reasons, including her willingness to challenge herself and strike out, even in her early 90s, on adventures that few would dare. An example is Lucinda's determination to hike the 5-mile Cordham Trail on the Sonoma coast. She hiked it over time, completing each of the 5 segments of the trail between the ages of 91 and 92. I joined Lucinda for several of these outings, but not all. On one of the hikes that Lucinda did only with June, she was inspired to write a poem. And I also admired Lucinda, as we've heard earlier, for her creativity, including her love of poetry writing. I'd like to share the poem that she wrote on this occasion. A lovely afternoon in October with June. We walked along the trail along the coast, high above the beach, saw ocean smooth and blue, with sparkles far as eye could reach. A ship way out and tiny, with a thin white wake. Clear sky went on forever, no cloud a spot could make. Scattered, stark, black, jagged rocks stood firm and tall, as eager waves smash against them, did not move at all. It is autumn along the beaten trail. Greenery has turned to brown, yet here and there white daisies nodded. We are still in town. Now when in bed my inward eye sees vivid pictures, as in art, of that lovely afternoon always here in memory's heart. Thank you, Lucinda. You will be kept in memory's heart.
Hello, everybody. I'm Terry Sackett. Many years ago, I was married to Bruce, Lucinda's son. We were lucky enough to produce an amazing son, Nathan, who's unable to be here today. I have a letter Nathan wants me to read, but first I would like to express my love and admiration for Lucinda. She taught me a very valuable lesson in that when Bruce and I divorced, I was not divorced from their wonderful family. Lucinda continued a relationship with me and my daughters until she passed. She was an amazing, caring, and devoted mother-in-law, and I will continue to miss her. Now from Nathan, and this is long, sorry. Lucinda Brashares, known to me as Grandma Lou, was a grandmother who taught me many important things, but I wanted to share 3 points. Number 1, my grandmother showed her love by writing. Number 2, my grandmother was an adventurer. And number 3, my grandmother was a political inspiration. First, the writing. It is weird to reflect on this now, but Grandma Lou was probably the last person to ever write me a handwritten letter. In fact, I can say with confidence that 95% of letters I ever received in my life were from Grandma Lou. I remember with glee being a young child, excited to open her letters, often with stickers or poems or pictures. Later in my life, it was newspaper clippings, book suggestions, or other family updates. Over the last few years, she did this for my children, sending them letters with stickers that perfect school teacher cursive with similar love and thoughtfulness. Over the years, I probably took these letters for granted, not appreciating the deeper message embedded in the kind act she was saying over and over again. I love you, and I want to share my thoughts with you. This was one of her methods of imparting her wisdom, the act of sharing her thoughts, however seemingly mundane at times, with the pen and paper. Number 2, the adventurer. My grandmother was also sort of a badass. I recall when she traveled the country in an RV. I remember visiting her and my grandfather at various campsites when they visited. I remember hiking with her and camping in a tent outside her RV over holidays when they were in town. I recall seeing pictures and hearing her stories of traveling the world before it became trendy. I remember seeing pictures of Grandma Lou backpacking with my father and my aunts and exploring the world over and over again. Here again, she was communicating an important message. I love you, and I want to share my adventures with you. This clearly embedded itself into my thinking, as I have since lived in boats and traveled in RVs and always reflect on my grandmother's sense of adventure. Finally, political inspiration. Grandma Lou always lived her ideals. I remember being very young and attending protests in Escondido about the war in Iraq. I remember her always volunteering or engaging on causes she felt were important. I remember her sending donations to causes for holidays, which as a kid, I'll be honest, I wasn't always thrilled about. But as I aged, I have come to admire and emulate her practice, that giving the gift of kindness is far better than some material items. Grandma Lou embodied her politics without shame and with a sense of moral righteousness I've come to admire and continuously seek to model for my own kids. Grandma Lou showed her love by modeling the kind of behavior from political activism to engaging in her church that demands respect. My grandmother holds a special place in my heart and continues to teach me as I move through my life. I feel lucky to have had the time with her. I had, and will always be so grateful to have the model of such a loving, adventurous, and inspiring role model. Grandma Lou, I love you, and you will forever be missed.
I have a really loud voice. Can everyone hear me? No? You want the mic? In fact, okay. I'm going to stand back here. Lucinda told me my voice was really loud because we were pew partners. She would sit here and I would sit here, and I loved to sing. And so she'd kind of turn around and go. Anyway, I really didn't know her until a couple years ago, but when all the COVID stuff started, I gave her a phone call, and she said, would you like to write letters? So we became pen pals. And we also had in common that my father was a Methodist minister, conscientious objector, and English and French, just like her husband was. So we had that in common, and she started writing me letters, and I was blown away by her penmanship at her age. She didn't even have lines on the paper. They were all straight. The grammar was incredible. I mean, it was unbelievable. I have a lot of friends and myself who screw up everything when they're writing letters, but she was amazing. She also told me she had written a poem where she was living, and it only got 3rd place. And she said there was a chocolate that they were going to bring me, but it took them a long time to get it. And she said, I love chocolate. So I said, okay. I love to go to C's. So she said, well, it needs to be dark chocolate and creamy centers and C's. I said, okay, great. So every 2 or 3 weeks, I drop one off at the desk for her. And she was, I can't tell you what an amazing woman she was. So cheerful, even though I got this letter 6 days before she passed away. Here was the first line. Yesterday was the first day of spring, and she knew she was passing. Early in March, June turned my bed around so I could face out the window and have a great view. The 2 big trees are loaded with white blossoms, and there's a pink tree blooming. There are little songbirds like juncos, finch, and many others entertaining us as we come along, and they eat seeds. And she and I both love cats. We love dogs. She told me that her son shares a dog. Is that right? Okay, and there are cats too. And, oh, okay. And we love birds, so we had a lot in common. My dad took us hiking every summer in Yosemite, all over the place. He climbed out with me. I had no idea. They had so much in common. Unbelievable. Anyway, I think that's it. Oh, I did want to just read her poem that she sent me during COVID. In our own little nest, sheltered we are, in distance near and yet so far. It's time for the mail. What surprise might it bring? A beautiful card that makes my heart sing. A friend is thinking of me, and me only. I live alone, but I never feel lonely. Thank you. And their kids are incredible, too. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So we are so fortunate that my Aunt Helen, who's back there, wave at us, honey, and my husband Jeffrey and I were part of Lucinda's life, and also her family. So we found out about Lucinda because June and Woody helped us find a home for Aunt Helen, and because she recommended Pollen Creek. So we were moving Helen from Santa Fe. And when Helen moved in, Lucinda adopted Helen as a friend, as a colleague, and as family. So we were part of Lucinda's family, thank goodness to her. She would always invite Helen over to join her for meals. And when it was family meals, she invited us to join her as well, which was an honor. Lucinda would always check in on Helen. Anytime she saw her, she would come over to say hi. And she would call. If Helen wasn't feeling well, she'd call, she'd send cards. And Helen felt like where Lucinda was, that was home. My aunt says that Lucinda was so calming and so caring, and they had a lot in common. Helen was an explorer too in her life, and traveled in a house on wheels in an amphibious Jeep and for National Geographic. And it was so wonderful to know about Lucinda and her husband's travels in their house on wheels for 7 years. And Lucinda was very interested in Helen's travels with National Geographic for 15 years. They began to discover how much they have in common, the love of cats and birds, and exploring and reading, and so love of Yosemite, and environmental protection. And then Jeffrey and I kept discovering all of Jeffrey said, please take me with you to the memorial, because he owns a bike shop and is at a bike place down south in Monterey. But so to find out that she loved biking and traveling, that was so fantastic. And environmental protection, that's dear to our heart, as their whole family is. And then to find out that her husband was a minister in Escondido. I grew up in Escondido area, and my father did the electrical wiring for the church that her husband was the minister at. And my brother and sister got married in that very church. Jeffrey's dad was a minister, so we just kept finding all these commonalities, which was just delightful. I also am bringing with us a message from Pollen Creek. Suzanne Black, who saw me, I said, oh, we're going to go to Lucinda's memorial. And she said, oh, I want to go, but I'm here until 5. And she said, I just want you to tell everybody how much that they miss Lucinda. She said, Suzanne said she was so positive and friendly and always caring for us, caring for other people, despite what she was going through. And so Suzanne is here. All of the concierges and all of the other folks are here with us too. And we just love Lucinda. Thank you for letting me tell you all about that.
I'm Jane Holler, and I am the Anna Circle leader here at this church. And Lucinda was a part of our group, and I have only been in this church for 8 years, but she offered so much information and connection to all of us. And at Circle, it was the Response magazine, as you've heard. It's such a big part of her life that she shared with us and helped us to develop a need to have that magazine also. One of our members couldn't be here, and that's Marcia Dupree. And so Marcia wrote something, and I'm going to read that to you now. Marcia says, I remember Lucinda with deep reverence. There truly has been no one like her in my lifetime of 80 years. She and her husband, Reverend Bob Brashares, came to our church knowing the Schlagers from their previous work as pastors and wives. Evelyn Slager and Lucinda were in our UMW Anna Circle and just seemed to radiate the kindness of angels. Plus, they were so well read, not only of the Bible, but of the current events and the interfacing of both. Lucinda genuinely felt for those of us who didn't subscribe to our United Methodist Response magazine. If we also didn't check out the magazine online or in our library, woe be it. Thankfully, each month we would count on her to bring us up to date on the thoughtful articles that we should be more informed about to lead our Christian lives more effectively. It was obvious that she cared about each one of us, but clearly and rightly, she cared about her dear children. Her move to Pollen Creek with many of our other FUMC senior members brought her much relief and happiness, but COVID caused much more isolation. We miss her greatly. I too found that I would send Lucinda cards in the mail, and occasionally she would call just to chat, and I would call her. And sometimes it was a 20 or a 30-minute conversation, but she was always excited to have people call her, to share with her, and I miss her terribly.
Anybody else that wants to share?
Hi, I'm Sherry Johnson, and I'm Bruce Brashares' girlfriend, boyfriend, girlfriend. I got that mixed up, I'm sorry, honey. Lucinda, it's hard for me to explain all the different things I thought about her, but when I think about her, I think of kindness and gentleness. She was probably the most selfless person that I have ever met. Material things did not mean anything to Lucinda. She cared about the people around her. She cared about the planet. She loved her children. She was crazy about Nathan, absolutely crazy about Nathan. And when those great-grandchildren came, she just had a new glow about her. So one of my memories of Lucinda that I had to just learn recently, that she wasn't really into dogs, but she was into cats. But Bruce and I have a dog. Her name is Callie. She happens to be a Toto dog. And I used to tease Lucinda all the time that she must have been the Dorothy of Wizard of Oz, because she had these red shoes that she wore almost her whole life that I knew her. She must have bought new shoes from time to time, but the same style. But she said, no, Sherry, I'm really not a dog person. So anyway, a wonderful, wonderful woman. And through all of her battles with her illness, you would never know that we were with her the last day before she couldn't walk any longer. Bruce and I went and had lunch with her at Pollen Creek, and it was that very day that she took a turn, so we were so grateful we took the time. I loved her. I'm going to miss her.